What if your family tree could solve a 100-year-old murder? In 1979, a family exploring Buffalo Cave in Idaho made a discovery that would haunt investigators for decades. 200 feet into the darkness, they found a headless human torso wrapped in a decaying burlap sack. No name, no identity, no clues. The case went cold immediately. For 40 years, he was known only as Clark County John Doe, until 2019. When investigators discovered the answer wasn't buried in the ground, but hidden in a family tree, what they found changed everything. When that torso was first found in 1979, the case was a complete dead end. Forensic analysis at the time was limited, but it determined the remains belonged to a white man with reddish-brown hair, likely in his 40s. Without a head, however, positive identification was deemed next to impossible. Investigators could only guess that he had died within the last 5 to 10 years, and for over a decade, that's all they had. Then, in 1991, the case took another bizarre turn. An 11-year-old girl exploring the very same cave found a mummified hand just sitting on the cave floor. This gruesome discovery kicked off a new, more thorough excavation. Investigators unearthed more burlap sacks, this time containing an arm and 2 legs, but still, no head was ever found. The hands had actually been sent for fingerprint analysis back in '79, but no matches were ever made, and due to lost paperwork, it's unclear if they were ever returned to Idaho. The mystery just kept getting deeper. Who was this man? Who had taken the time to dismember him with multiple sharp tools, wrap the pieces in burlap, and bury them in this desolate cave? And where was his head? For years, investigators and anthropologists from Idaho State University, the Smithsonian, and even the FBI studied the bones, but they were stuck. The case grew colder and colder, and the identity of the man in Buffalo Cave seemed destined to be lost to time. For 40 years, he was just a ghost, a nameless collection of remains in a university archive. By 2019, the case was frozen solid, but technology had come a long way since 1979, and a revolutionary new field was changing everything: forensic genetic genealogy. This technique merges advanced DNA analysis with the massive family trees that ordinary people build on public genealogy websites. Think of it like this: millions have uploaded their DNA to sites like GEDmatch and Family Tree DNA to find distant relatives. Investigators can extract DNA from unidentified remains, run it through these same databases, and hunt for matches, even third, fourth, or fifth cousins. From there, it becomes a painstaking process of reverse engineering family trees to pinpoint where the John or Jane Doe fits in. It's often a long shot, but for a case with absolutely no other leads, it was a brilliant ray of hope. The Clark County Sheriff's Office and Idaho State University decided to go for it. They reached out to the DNA Doe Project, a nonprofit organization powered by a dedicated crew of volunteer genealogists who live for these impossible cases. These volunteers pour their own time and resources into giving the nameless back their names, driven by a shared belief that no one should be forgotten. DNA was carefully extracted from the bones of the Buffalo Cave John Doe and sent off to the experts. That 40-year-old dead end finally had a new road to follow. And if you think this kind of investigative science is as compelling as I do, consider subscribing Nightmare Tales. We dive into stories just like this one, where new technology is cracking the coldest cases. The team at the DNA Doe Project faced a monumental task. A group of 14 volunteer genealogists, led by Anthony and Lee Redgrave, dove into the digital abyss. They uploaded the DNA profile and immediately got hundreds of hits from distant relatives. Now, the real work began. For 15 grueling weeks, the team poured over 2,000 hours into the case. They were digital detectives, meticulously building out massive family trees from these faint DNA connections, all searching for that one critical point where the family lines intersected and led them to their John Doe. But this case had a huge, tangled hurdle: endogamy. That's the practice of marrying within a small, closed-off community for generations, which was common in the 19th century pioneer communities this man's family came from. Genetically, endogamy makes a mess. Distant cousins can end up sharing as much DNA as closer relatives, which turns the already difficult task of mapping a family tree into a nightmare. It was like trying to solve a puzzle where all the pieces looked almost identical. The volunteers had to untangle this complex web of shared DNA, which was made even more complicated because the man's grandfather was a polygamist with 4 wives, creating hundreds of cousins. They built out multiple trees and cross-referenced every last detail. The final family tree they constructed swelled to include over 31,730 people. Despite the insane difficulty, the team didn't give up. Slowly but surely, through sheer determination and thousands of hours of work, one family line started to stand out. They traced it back through the generations and then forward again, looking for a man born around 1870 who had simply vanished from all records. After weeks of battling that tangled family tree, the genealogists had their man. His name was Joseph Henry Loveless. Born in the Utah Territory in 1870 to early Latter-day Saints pioneers, the dates lined up perfectly. He would have been 46 years old in 1916, a perfect match for the forensic profile. Digging into historical records, the team discovered Loveless wasn't just a missing person. He was a genuine Wild West outlaw, a bootlegger and counterfeiter who used a string of aliases like Walt Cairns and Charles Smith to evade the law. He was arrested multiple times, but was notorious for escaping jail, once by using a saw he'd ingeniously hidden in his shoe. Then came a critical clue from an unexpected place. They found a family gravestone in Payson, Utah, with Joseph Henry Loveless's name and birth date on it, but no date of death. It was a cenotaph, a monument for someone buried elsewhere. This was a huge sign that his own family had no idea what had happened to him after he disappeared. The final piece of the puzzle was a 1916 wanted poster. That May, Loveless, using the alias Walt Cairns, was arrested for murdering his common-law wife, Agnes, with an axe. Just days later, he escaped from the St. Anthony jail and was never seen again. The clothing found with the remains in the cave, a maroon sweater, a white pinstriped shirt, and dark trousers, was a near-perfect match to the description on that very wanted poster. All signs pointed to their John Doe being the fugitive murderer, Joseph Henry Loveless. To be absolutely certain, investigators tracked down Loveless's living grandson, who was 87 years old and living in California. He agreed to provide a DNA sample, and it was a perfect match. After 40 years as a John Doe and over a century of silence, the man in the cave finally had his name back. Identifying the body didn't just solve the mystery in the cave, it resurrected a dark and violent story over a century old. Joseph Henry Loveless wasn't some random victim. He was a man on the run from a brutal crime of his own making. In early May 1916, while living in a tent outside Dubois, Idaho, he murdered his wife, Agnes Octavia Caldwell Loveless, with an axe. Newspaper accounts state her head was hacked to pieces, allegedly while 2 of their children were present to witness it. He was arrested and jailed, but as one of his own children reportedly said at Agnes's funeral, "Papa never stayed in jail very long and he will soon be out." True to form, on May 18, 1916, Loveless used that saw he'd smuggled in his shoe, cut through the jail bars and vanished. He was now a wanted fugitive, and then, nothing. He was never seen or heard from again. His disappearance was so total that his own family never knew his fate. His violent life and sudden vanishing act became a dark family legend with a missing final chapter. Now, thanks to the DNA Doe Project, that chapter could be written. The evidence strongly suggests that Loveless was killed shortly after his 1916 escape. He was found in the very clothes described on his wanted poster. The man who murdered his wife with an axe had, in turn, been killed and dismembered with multiple sharp tools. His head was severed, and his body was dumped in a cave, not to be found for 63 years. Who killed him is still an open question, but the most popular theory is that it was a case of swift and brutal frontier justice. In the Wild West of 1916, it's widely speculated that locals, or perhaps even his wife's vengeful family, decided to take care of the problem themselves. The identification of Joseph Henry Loveless is one of the oldest cold cases ever solved using forensic genealogy. It's an incredible example of how modern science can reach back through time and pull a name out of 100 years of silence. A headless John Doe found in a remote Idaho cave in 1979 was finally unmasked as a murderer and fugitive from 1916. The tireless work of 14 volunteers who dedicated thousands of hours to untangling a ridiculously complex family tree gave a name to the nameless and brought a century-old story to a jaw-dropping conclusion. This case proves that the past is never truly buried. It's a powerful reminder that for every cold case, there's a story waiting to be told. And for every John and Jane Doe, there's a name waiting to be found. And sometimes, the key to unlocking it all is hidden in the one place we all share, our DNA. Thanks for watching. If you want to see more stories of incredible cold cases getting solved, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. We'll see you next time.